So Xandria has recently released this new album, Eclipse, on the 7th of August 2026. And it is their ninth studio album, second with newest vocalist Ambre. I think that I pronounced that right, I'm not sure. They are a German kind of symphonic metal band. They've been around, I think, in like the early 2000s, late 90s maybe. And yeah, I've not really been listening to their catalogue for very long. I've basically just come in on the previous release, the first one with the new vocalist, and I was pretty much blown away by that album. So, Xandria, as I stated, is a symphonic metal band, so you kind of go, well, female kind of lead vocals, symphonic, a lot of operatic stuff, orchestral things. You kind of start shifting into things like Evanescence, Nightwish, Epica, and, you know, all these things where basically the music kind of becomes carbon copies of each other, where it's basically they write these massive scope, symphonic, operatic kind of elements, and they're at the forefront with vocals and, you know, the choir and the orchestra and everything. And then the band are basically pushed to the background, basically just kind of being there because it is a metal band. But they're basically just there just to add a bit more of that kind of fluff and grit. But for the most part, it's just opera and symphonic vocals and orchestral kind of elements. And they all bleed together, these bands. As I said, there's not much in the way of metal musicianship. Usually when these female vocalists are singing, the guitars basically cut out altogether and basically just do nothing for a whole verse and only then come in for choruses. Given the reason why I'm not really into the kind of like female-fronted symphonic metal, not stating that female-fronted symphonic metal is a bad thing and it sucks women as vocalists, I'm not a part of that kind of group. I think women can be great in the metal industry, and they do belong in the metal industry, and they can make really good albums, like, as I stated, Xandria's previous work, as well as the band Solaris, as well as the band Unleash the Archers. All great female vocalists maintaining that heavy metal element. And what's basically isolated Xandria from the mass thing that all female-fronted symphonic metal bands do is bands like Nightwish, let's say. Nightwish is basically orchestrated from Thomas, who is the keyboardist, and he basically writes from that standpoint. He creates music based on the orchestral, operatic, key kind of element, and that is his forefront. That's what he does, and then he puts the band in. That's the way he writes. Xandria is founded by the rhythm guitarist, and therefore it is written from that degree. So it is more guitar orientated, it is more heavier, and more kind of versatile. Early albums, they didn't do solos, which again is a very typical thing of symphonic female metal bands, but later into their career they did start to incorporate more solos. And yeah, with the previous album, what really set that apart is Xandria really basically did a whole spectrum of ideas and genres and styles, which was a beast of an album, like really filled to the brim. It was 13 tracks, hour 15 minutes long, and with Ambra's new vocal work, she's not just operatic, she's not just poppy, she is operatic, she is poppy, or just plain like prog metal style, but she also has the ability to scream. This gives such a diversity to Xandria, as well as a genre which is so overdone with just mediocrity and just repetition. the previous album, you had songs that leaned more into the pop element, more into the symphonic element, more into heavy metal, more into death metal, more into prog metal, or basically just shoved all of them together in one entire song. Metal, symphonic, operatic, proggy, heavy metal, death metal, screams that weren't overdone but were kind of like scattered throughout the whole album and just made for just this massive piece. And while lead guitar wasn't orchestrated in every single track, it was there to a decent extent, more so than Nightwish that barely ever do it. And the Nightwish guitarist is actually known as a really great guitarist, yet he does bugger all but stand on stage and wave at people. He's completely pointless. So yeah, you had certain songs where the guitars actually leaned very heavy in. He was there for the intro, he was there after the chorus or before a chorus, he's there in the bridge, he's there at the end of the song. So even if there were songs which may have lacked it, and then some songs which had it but not to a big extent, there was other songs where he really leaned into it. But Xandria and some people complained, stating, well, Xandria is symphonic metal, and that's what they have been. So, getting screams, this is a first, and it's a bit of a shock. Some people didn't really take to it that well, even though I thought it was tastefully done. Some people didn't want it outright, because that's not what they've listened to previously with Xandria. People also stated that the album is long, being an hour 14, hour 15 odd. I don't understand it, because I'm basically from heavy metal, prog metal kind of thing, not really the symphonic kind of thing of basically just 4-minute songs and follow a very repetitive pattern over and over and over again, same formula on repeat and be done, and wrap it up in a really short little package. So I liked the mass offering and the fact that they could expand the songs and put a lot of time into it so it could go through multiple layers and styles and not follow a simplistic formula. But Xandria themselves also kind of stated that the previous album was a bit kind of all over the place. It was like a bit of this and a bit of that and a bit of that and a bit of this, and then this over there, and then this goes into this, and it was just everywhere. And they said it wasn't really tightly, done. So going into Eclipse, they kept stating it's going to basically be a lot tighter, but it is also our most diverse album. I found that kind of fascinating, stating that this album is going to be tighter and not as sporadic and everything, so it's going to flow more naturally instead of just being all over the place, but it is also at the same time the most diverse. It was kind of interesting. I didn't really kind of understand that, and they're doing things completely different than they've ever done before, which is always a plus when a band is constantly evolving and changing. So I do highly praise a band that goes in for that kind of style instead of just this is a formula that works, we'll do this until the day we die, which is brutally annoying and not creative in the slightest. But now that I've got the album and I've listened to it a few times, it's not a bad album. They have got a new style. They've gone very Celtic. I can't stand Celtic. It is very cheesy cringe to me, but it is something different and something new, so even though it's not really my thing, I still can't exactly kind of be so opposed to it, because it is something new and fresh and something new that they're trying, and I can't really blame them for it. I think it's probably a bit much. It's also very film score-y kind of sound. Again, with the poster, if you kind of look at it, the album cover was designed by the person who did covers for the film series Hunger Games, which you can easily kind of tell. Before I even knew that it was made by the exact same person, even I thought this is very Hunger Games style. So very film scorey, very cinematic is this album and involved in the cover. The cover's quite genius. For every single song there is traces of the song's kind of meaning and everything basically shoved into the album artwork. There's traces of it, which I think is really smart, that every single song is represented in some aspect in the album art. I think that's a genius idea. But I digress, let's kind of get into it. So this album's 11 songs, so 2 less than the previous. It clocks in at 57 minutes, so they have shortened it, but it is still a decent kind of length, close to the hour mark, which is not too bad. The first track, Zigigi, Zigigi, I can't pronounce it for the life of me. Is basically just an intro track. It's basically just over a minute. So you basically go from 11 songs to technically 10 actual tracks. That's 3 less tracks than the previous album, and you knocked off over 15 minutes of time compared to the previous, which isn't great, but again, depends how well they've executed this album. Now the first track luckily does bleed into Eclipse, the first actual track, which is decent. I really hate it when bands basically do an intro track which lasts like 3 minutes, a full-fledged simplistic song, and then it just ends, and then the first actual track starts and has nothing to do with the intro. I despise that, it's a complete waste of time. But this one does a nice setup and build up into the track, which is brilliant, and as the title track, you have a lot to look forward to. This is the title of the album, this is it. And it's heavy, probably the most heaviest aggressive track on the album. It has screams in the kind of bridge section, there's a scream towards the end of the track, it has one of the bigger kind of epic kind of solos in it and everything. There's operatic vocals, it's big, it's bombastic, it's heavy, it's got the versatility of vocals in there. And as I said, a real good solo. Starting off well. And then going into colours. Colours again kind of follows heaviness with down-tuned guitars. A new kind of thing for Xandria again. There is little elements of screams, basically just for the intro, after a chorus, and then in a kind of bridge section. Just little scattering pieces and everything, just basically like one word or something like that, so not overly done. Has melody when the verses kind of come in, then it kind of builds into the kind of heaviness, still a kind of heavy-ish kind of track and everything. A kind of melodic solo that kind of just is very rhythmatic, kind of goes with the rhythm of the kind of song. Pretty nice. A little short and kind of concise, not as big and epic as Eclipse was, but still a decently heavy song, a kind of nice rhythmic kind of solo that is enjoyable. Then we get into Shannon's Home. Now the Shannon's Home, some people say, is the best of the album, but it is the most Celtic, Irish dancing pub kind of anthem song on this, and as I stated, I can't stand this. It is different, obviously, but yeah, it's different, but just not really my kind of thing. It's very upbeat, kind of poppy and everything, not that heavy, very Celtic. There's a kind of decent solo, and the bridge section's the best part because it's when the heavy chugging guitars kind of come in and just completely wipe out all the stupid Celtic nonsense. So I really enjoy that part, and then the little bit of the solo, but overall I just find it just real cringe, poppy, not very metal heavy anything, just not that great. But again, that's personal preference, you could argue. And then going into the next kind of few tracks, like The Grand Illusion and Wave of Tanis, and this is where it's like, they say that it's their most diverse, but I find a lot of the tracks to kind of blend together. So what I mean by that is basically, you're going from Eclipse, which has screams in the bridge, to Colours that just has a one-word scream intro, then after the chorus, and then one in the bridge. And then you're going all the way to, like, The Last Generation, and then Law, I think, which is towards the end of the album, with 0 screams, outside of, yet again, when they do come back, it's just in the bridge. It is massively underutilised. While the previous album, the screams were basically like not overused, but tastefully really done, but it was all over the place, which gave a lot of diversity and heaviness to the music. But as I said, going out of Eclipse, which is kind of like their heaviest, kind of more kind of previous album, and Colours is a bit more heavy, but a bit more kind of mainstream, and then Shannon's Home just being Celtic nonsense, I said the rest of the tracks just go very poppy, still kind of has a heaviness, but it lacks diversity. The songs are like 5-minute-y, and everything. There is no screaming whatsoever. Proper like lead intros and that you got on the previous album, and leads after bridges and or after a chorus and into a chorus and big solo sections. Just completely missing. As I said, it's basically the rhythms all seem to kind of just bleed into each other. Like the formula is the exact same. It's still heavier than Nightwish and everything, and the guitars are still kind of there, but it's just, they all bleed together. And there's not much in the way screaming, it just completely disappears. Like they're embarrassed of it, and then it's just following formula again, in a way. So the Grand Illusion has a solo, but it's short and sweet. Wave of Tanis is back yet again to, thankfully, a long solo, and it also has an ending solo played under the vocals, which is remarkable. I'm so glad that they did that, because that's more reminiscent of the previous album, where they basically just don't be a very cinematic film score, vocally driven band. It is the full band. The band isn't just vocals and the symphonic side, it is your drummer, your guitarist, the lead solos, the heaviness, and the range of the vocalist. But again, it seems that everything is basically held back to basically be this very film-scored kind of very formulaic, kind of restrained album. And then with North Star, people will compare that to Disney. Why am I listening to heavy metal and getting Disney? I don't understand. It's like the previous album had the poppy elements and I didn't mind it, but they still knew that they were a heavy metal band and they had proggy elements to it. Prog metal. That expansive, aggressive, brutal kind of metal mixed in with something ridiculously poppy. And it was so well done. As for North Star, it's just poppy. And I said the previous tracks, Grand Illusion and Wave of Tanis, even though Wave of Tanis has great solo work, it's just very simplistic. Same goes for Masquerade. Masquerade is basically, again, a song that's just bleeding into everything else. Doesn't have any standouts. Great kind of feature. Same with basically the poetry, the real world and lore. The Last Generation gives something a bit different. It's melodic, there's a lot of child choir in there and everything. But it's like a 5-odd minute kind of song where it's basically just all melodic pianos and child choirs with the vocalist and everything. It has a very Pink Floyd solo to it, which is again one of the bigger solos, which is again great, and the best part of The Last Generation. But other than that, the song is just such a slog and so unbelievably slow, I'm not keen. And then again, the poetry of the real world is yet again this mid-tempo, like majority of the album, very similar formula, just done again. And then the last track, Lore. This is their big prog moment, where the song is 8 minutes long. So you would think this is basically more in line of what the previous album had to offer, with their longer songs, with all the diversity going on and the massive expanse. It isn't. It's basically just the very formulaic previous songs, but stretched out beyond belief, and for 8 entire minutes, they don't even have a guitar solo in there to basically break up the monotony and to put something fresh in there, which completely sucks. 8 minutes, you could have put a great solo in there. You could have done a lot of variations, but you didn't. There is occasional screaming, but again, the screaming compared to the previous album where she screamed, it would get ridiculously heavy and brutal. As for her screams, kind of just seem to be really slapped onto a very mid-tempo, formulaic kind of soundscape. And that's the issue with the album. It just seems that Ambre is basically restrained to the very mid vocal range. I'm not stating that is it for the whole album. She does go through the whole range, but there is a lot of songs where there's just not really much going on, of diversity and a lot of nuances. Again, with the musicality, the actual band, I said the guitarist does have his moments, the drums have their moments where it's blistering and incredible, but it just seems that this album is purely focused on just being purely cinematic, instead of metal and diverse like the previous album. So it's an alright listen. As I said, the vocalists are still great, there's still solos there, but for the most part, it is very disappointing given the previous album.